Good morning. If you are joining us this morning, we have your video and audio disabled for the event, and we are going to be waiting a few minutes for everyone to log in. We're glad you're here. This is going to be the Future of Work, Shifting Dynamics of Workforce Training and Education webinar. We'll have you hold on for a few more minutes as others log in. Good morning again. For those of you who are joining us and logging in, we're waiting just a minute or two to make sure everyone gets logged in before we get started. We have your video and audio disabled for the event. You'll be able to ask questions in the Q&A window. And if you have any technical difficulties, please post those in the chat. We'll get started in just a minute. All right, we're going to get started. Good morning again. I'm Renee John. I'm with Valley Vision. I am the project leader for the 21st Century Workforce Impact Area. We're glad you're joining us this morning. Our webinar topic today is the future of work, shifting dynamics of workforce training and education. This is the second of 3 webinars that we're doing on the future of work. Our first webinar talked about the rise of automation and the impacts on specific industries and sectors and jobs. This one is on changing dynamics of workforce training and education, and we will be having a third webinar that is yet to be scheduled on the impacts of the gig economy. This is our agenda of what we're going to be doing over the next hour. You'll take a quick look. We do have some audience polls during the event, and we hope that you will contribute. The 21st Century Impact Area at Valley Vision is focused on pursuing a regional workforce ecosystem that is effective and responsive in addressing needs while preparing for the future of work. Our strategies are to conduct independent research and lead multi-stakeholder convenings to optimize and refine workforce development system in the region. Valley Vision's overall mission is to improve the livability and prosperity of the greater Sacramento region for all. The way that we accomplish this, we have 3 core tenets in the 21st Century Workforce Impact Area, and that is we seek to inform. And we're doing some of that today through the poll research that we're presenting. We seek to connect, so convene and bring together stakeholders in the workforce system, and to champion, which includes such things as innovating and also encouraging best practice models that we learn from other regions, as well as pilot initiatives within this region. we're going to launch our first poll question now and ask you all if you will contribute an answer, please, and then we'll share the results. Our question today is, how effective is online education? Do you think it is more effective than in-person education, as effective, or less effective than in-person education? We'll give you just a minute to fill that out. All right, let's see what survey says. 54% of you believe online education is as effective as in-person education. 46% think it is less effective than in-person education. And we did not have anybody say that it was more effective than in-person education. Interesting. Okay. So the webinar overview, we're currently experiencing a large transition to remote work and distance learning in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we want to look at what shifts are occurring in the capital region. What we've brought forward for you today are some public opinion polling responses. This public opinion polling was done pre-COVID-19. And we also are bringing some resources that are available for online education, as well as the response we're seeing in the capital region. I'm going to introduce to you our very own Evan Schmidt, who is currently our Senior Director of Research and Strategy. She's also the incoming CEO for Valley Vision. So as of tomorrow, she will be our CEO, as well as Shannon Williams, who's the Executive Director of the Institute for Social Research at Sacramento State University, who conducted the poll. And let me just introduce here. So this polling was done in combination with the Institute for Social Research at Sacramento State University, and it was sponsored by Western Health Advantage, as well as our Future of Work webinar series is sponsored by the Region's 4 Workforce Investment Boards, and that includes the Sacramento Employment and Training Agency, North Central Counties Consortium, Golden Sierra, and the Yolo County Workforce Investment Board. So we're pleased to bring this information to you, and I will hand it over to Evan and Shannon to discuss the research.
Thanks, Renee. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here and happy to be sharing some poll results with you all about the future of work and specifically about education. Let's go to the next slide and I'll launch into talking about this poll that was out in the field last summer. So this was all a part of the workforce and education poll. So we were looking at attitudes on education and workforce development opportunities. And it was a very future-focused poll. And the report that we already put out back earlier in the maybe late winter was focused on the future of work themes. But the survey itself was a very broad, wide-ranging survey. And so there's additional data kind of more focused on education that we're going to be talking about today. So our polling series is something we've been doing about twice a year for the last few years, and the Workforce and Education poll is the 5th poll that we've conducted. We have a polling steering committee, and they help us kind of identify pressing issues in the region that we want to know people's opinions about. So in the past, we've done surveys on civic amenities, transportation, livability, and the environment. In addition to this workforce and education poll, our next poll, which is coming out in July, mid-July, is going to be focused on people's experiences around COVID-19. And we have a partner in Cap Public Radio for that poll. So we're going to be really excited to release that data, and they're going to be sharing a lot of stories on Cap Public Radio about that poll. Next slide, please. So our polling has a very robust regional methodology. It's administered by the Institute for Social Research, and I'm going to let Shannon talk a little bit about how the panel is made up and what the methodology is behind the surveys.
Thanks, Evan, and hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Apparently, my cat has just decided that since I'm going to speak, she's going to come in, and I apologize. So what we are, I'm so sorry. So my partnership, or our partnership, ISR's partnership with Evan and Valley Vision is putting together a survey panel. And how that's unique in terms of traditional surveys is that polling surveys were usually conducted doing random calling to individuals' phones and their landlines. And that was a really effective way of doing sampling because people usually had phones in their homes. With the advent of cell phones and people not answering their phone, the survey panel is a really great methodology in terms of getting a cohort of representative folks who will answer surveys over time. And so what we do is we enroll them in the panel, and they answer a series of demographic questions, which then we are able to merge with the research survey. So it's a really great methodology that we have developed over these years. So in terms of this survey, we had 826 respondents, and the survey was actually in the field in July of last year. The margin of error, which means the variation in the responses that would be statistically variation, would be plus or minus 3%. And then in this survey, we reported results in the 6 areas in the Sacramento region: Sacramento, El Dorado, Placer, Yolo, Yuba, and Sutter counties. And I don't think my cat has anything else to say, so I'm going to mute.
Thank you, Shannon. I love it that your cat chimed in and is with us on the webinar. And I think that's just a little slice of the future of work. If we're all working remotely, we all get to see what's going on. So thank you for that. I think, we're really, we love the partnership that we have with Sac State. It is a really great and robust survey methodology that allows us to understand in a demographically representative way the views of people across the region. So it's a great tool for us as Valley Vision. It's also a great tool for the region to understand where people are on major issues. So I do want to note this data was collected last summer. So I think something that's important about what we're sharing today is that it really kind of sets up a baseline. This is before we had observed all of these different transformations around how education is being delivered. And that gives us a good understanding of kind of where people were before all this started. And then our panel is going to help us have that conversation of where are things going now and how have things changed since then. So we can go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to start diving into the data, and this is one of those slides that's going to set up part of that baseline. So 1/3 of our workers are working in a different industry than what they were trained to do. So if we're looking at, we ask people, are you in the industry that you trained for? Most people are, but there is a significant portion of people who are working in different industries. And we asked a series of questions about interest and willingness to train and retrain, and I'm going to share more information with you here now. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this question is what we call a forced choice question, where you have 2 different statements that might be more on the extreme than what you would want to say, but we ask you to choose which one best reflects what is true for you. And so the 2 statements here is, I'm ready to learn new skills or completely retrain to remain employable in the future, or I have all the skills I need for the rest of my working life. So overall, in our entire regional sample, 2/3 of workers overall said they're ready to learn new skills or to retrain completely, which is a pretty large portion of workers. I also wanted to show you this data by gender because there was a significant difference between females and males. So if you look at the orange bar, you can see that 78% of women are ready to learn new skills or completely retrain, whereas 57% of men are. So it looks like women might be, for whatever reason, more oriented towards additional training. You can go to the next slide. All right, so we asked them both, are you currently in a training program and would you like more training or education? And so when you look at this chart, you can see the orange bar. Well, first of all, it's arranged by income level. So you can see the orange bar is people who would like to obtain more formal education and training. And the blue line is people who are currently in a job training program. So the space between the orange and the blue line really represents the people who would like to be in a training program. So you can see it kind of goes as a curve with the 50 to 70, with people who are making 50 to 75K annually, the most likely to be in training, but also the most interested in more formal education or training. And then it kind of goes down from there. But overall, there's a pretty high degree of interest in training with, when we looked at the overall regional sample, 57% of respondents would like more formal education or training. Next slide, please. All right, so this is getting to kind of a baseline understanding of what people think about online versus traditional education. I'm glad to say that they had a more positive view of online education than what it appears in this webinar, where we had 0% of people saying it was more effective. There was actually a pretty significant amount of people, when you broke it apart by these different aspects, who actually felt like online education was better than more traditional education. So the top item is a good value for the money, where we had almost half of the people saying online education is better for that. And then it goes down from there, but you can see a wide range of options for curriculum is mostly the same, but there are some who think it's better. Instruction tailored to each individual, rigorous testing and grading that can be trusted, high quality instruction from well-qualified instructors, and a degree that will be viewed positively by employers. So, you know, that orange category of it's viewed up about the same is typically the majority, which was the same in this webinar as well. But there are a portion who are looking at these elements and saying that online education offers something that's better. We can go to the next slide. Something that was interesting in the data was that if you have experience using online education, you have a much more positive view of it. So if you look at these same data points, on the orange bar, we're looking at people who have used online education before, and the blue bar is people who have not used online education before. So you can see that the experiences reported by those, or the perspective on online education is much more positive for those who have experienced it before, by a pretty significant degree across all of these different characteristics. And then when you looked across our subpopulations and our crosstabs, the Black and Latinx respondents were also more likely to perceive online education programs more positively than traditional classroom-based programs on more of those different subcategories. So next slide, please. And actually, the last thing I'll note about the online education is that as we've gone into our COVID-19 experience, you know, so many more of us have experienced online education than had before. And so when we look at even the perspective of people on this webinar, you know, is that because we have just come out of having these experiences with online education and we're thinking of what can be improved? Are more people open to more online education experiences now that more people have experienced it? These are all things that I think will be interesting to explore with the panel, and something that is going to be really relevant because online education is going to become, I think, a much more prevalent way of delivering education. So we also just asked people what their attitudes were about different types of education that they're experiencing. So four-year education is still very important to most people. You can see 60% of people rated it as very important, almost 30% is fairly important. So that's still really high on people's priority list. And we can go to the next slide. And then we also asked about career technical education and STEM, and you can see that those were both overwhelmingly positive for people, with the only real barrier being people's level of awareness about it. But overall, people rated those models of education really important, and that remains a high priority for people. Next slide. All right, so to draw some conclusions from this data set. So there is a significant interest in continued learning and training. So this is a good thing because I think as we're leaning towards the future of the future of work and kind of accelerating those trends all around with COVID-19, there's going to be a real need for training and retraining opportunities. And so people's willingness to be able to do that is a really positive thing. There's a high degree of willingness to change and adapt to new learning systems. So if you looked at our online education numbers and people's positive attitude towards those, especially people who have already experienced online education, that really suggests that, that people are open to trying different things. And because of that, it will be really important to use accessible online learning systems to provide opportunities moving forward. So I think innovating within that space of online education and providing points of access is going to be a just really important mechanism for being able to deliver education in the future. And I think that concludes my remarks, and I will be happy to answer questions, and I'll kick it back over to Renee.
Thank you, Evan. I appreciate that. It looks like we do have a couple of questions.
We had Rob, who is an online educator, and he was asking if the poll opinions on online education consider individual learning styles. I answered in the Q&A, but if Shannon or Evan can speak to this, it'd be greatly appreciated.
So, sorry, Isabel, could you ask that one more time?
The question was on the opinions versus traditional and online education, if learning styles were considered in their opinion of these two questions.
In terms of people's individual learning styles, no. I mean, I think that we tried to kind of take apart the concept of online education by pulling out those subcategories, but we did not try to match different learning styles to how they fit with online education. It was more general than that.
We have another question about how will CTE be taught in an online platform? That might be a question potentially for our panel as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I know that that's already coming out in community colleges and across the region. So yeah, I think that'll be great to have the panel address.
We have another question. What was the perception of the effectiveness of online CTE courses versus STEM, not just importance? So was effectiveness teased out separately?
The two questions that we asked about STEM and CTE were awareness and then importance. So we did not ask about the effectiveness, and we did not align them with online education.
Thank you.
So I think that as we're moving forward with our COVID-19 surveys, there's going to be some, so we have one that's coming out in July, but then we're planning on doing a repeat survey so we can continue to track change over time about people's experiences with COVID-19. And I think delivery of education systems and people's experiences with education is going to be a really important component to that in a way that is much more reflective of conditions on the ground than the questions in this survey. You know, I really think this survey kind of creates this baseline understanding of where people have been when it comes to online learning. And then we just went through this really intensive test of what does that look like and what works about it and what doesn't work about it. So we've arrived in a little bit of a different place, but I think this data helps us understand where people have been. And then as we survey again, we'll be able to dive in deeper and understand where they are now.
Okay, one last question. Do attitudes toward online change by level of education, elementary versus high school versus college? Was that teased out in the polling?
That is a really good question. And education attainment was not one of the crosstabs that we looked at, although we have the ability to. So maybe I can, maybe I'll get on the chat and follow up with that person and see if we might be able to look at that in more detail, but I don't have that answer sitting here right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think what we have next is another audience poll coming up. So we are going to ask you a question. Let us take a second to launch that. Do you think online education will be a more significant delivery system post-COVID recovery? And your options are, yes, we'll see significantly more education delivered online. I think it will go back to the way it was before. I think we'll see a desire for more face-to-face instruction, or I'm not sure. If you take a minute to answer that question, we would appreciate it. Okay, it looks like 92% say we will see significantly more education delivered online. 5%, I think it will go back to the way it was before, and 3%, I think we'll see a desire for more face-to-face instruction. Nobody here is unsure, so we must be an opinionated or very sure-footed bunch, and that's great. So thank you for participating.
Renee, I think just to respond to that, you know, looking at the amount of people on the webinar who think it's better, and then the different elements that we've looked at, it sounds like we have some work to do on our online education delivery and kind of figuring out how to solve some of the problems, how to fine tune different aspects of it, and make those improvements to kind of move people on that needle a little bit.
So I want to introduce our panel to you now, who is going to provide us their expertise on online education and training. We have Marcus Geisler, and I was teasing him earlier. He has the longest title of anyone I've ever had my pleasure to introduce. He is the current professor and regional director of employer engagement, information and communication technologies, digital media for the greater Sacramento region in California. We also have Sonali Joshi, Chief Operating Officer for Cell Ed, and we have Jenny Murphy, Dean of College and Continuing Education at CSU Sacramento. Go Hornets. And we are going to ask them a few questions to share their expertise with us. So our first panel question is, well, first we're going to have them provide a brief self-introduction and tell us how you are currently administering online education. And we'll start with you, Marcus.
All right, thank you for having me, and good morning, everyone. So I've been a professor of computer information science at Cosumnes River College since 1998, and have recently been in the regional director assignment, from which I'm actually, today's my last day. I'm going to return back to the classroom, and very gladly so. I have taught online since 1999, and way back when that was necessitated when we had to remodel the computer labs during the summer, and the only way we could teach classes was to do so online. I've taught on local cable TV. I earned my PhD online with Capella University, which allowed me to not leave Sacramento and to keep working. Let's see, I also teach a graduate level strategic management class for a university in Germany, and I've helped them build their online program. And in addition to, of course, teaching IT related classes here at CRC, I also have a special interest in ensuring that online content is accessible. So that's my exposure to online.
Thank you, Marcus. And how are you currently, you're currently teaching as well as a regional advisor? Okay.
Yes, they have allowed me to teach one course online during my assignment. I'm actually teaching 3 this summer because we had an adjunct leave relatively late, so I had to pick up an additional class. So I'm busy interacting with students from far away.
Thank you. Sonali, we'll have you introduce yourself next and tell us how you're currently delivering online education.
Hi, Molly from Cell Ed. Such a pleasure to be here. So Cell Ed is a mobile learning solution designed specifically to upskill adults around the world, and accessibility is the reason we were almost founded. So we're mobile first. We're not even online. You can access us on any cell phone, even a flip phone, no smartphone even required. Now we do have an app, we do have an online version, we do have a lot of other options, but we use the power of audio and two-way texting to make sure no learner is left behind, and we're 100% designed for adults. Started with adults and always have been about providing adults with life and work skills. We work with government agencies, education providers, employers, libraries, really anyone who's serving adults in different ways and has training and education needs to deliver education to learners and meet them where they're at, regardless of digital literacy, digital access, literacy, language, or numeracy challenges. So that's CELED, and I know we'll get more into kind of our methodologies later.
Thank you so much. And Jenny, we'll have you go next.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone, and I'm happy to be here today in a whole new way, right, of sharing our knowledge and being a panelist. So Sac State, a regional comprehensive institution, and we serve on the traditional enrollment side about 32,000 traditional students in a traditional pipeline every year. And then as the Dean for the College of Continuing Education, my college serves an additional about 80,000 individuals every year. That could be a one-day conference, a 2-hour online training for part of a certification, or it could be a full graduate program or degree completion program. So it's really a wide swath of activities that my college leads in serving adults and also youth in order to enhance access for Sacramento State. In March, our entire institution went to virtual delivery, and that is very different than just simply saying we're online or we're remote. It is just a whole different way, and there was a ton of, I think, just situations where we had to salvage a semester. And some students were more ready for that, and some faculty were more ready than others. And of course, not all of us, be it students or faculty or administrators, have the same access or digital literacy. Sac State will continue to be online in the fall, and we're doing a great deal of professional development for our faculty this summer. Also, what's going on this summer is summer session is online for all of our students. We're actually seeing record enrollment this summer and continuing to build and grow the digital literacy and the capacity of our institutions, our faculty, and our students all at the same time. It's a real laboratory, if you will, of collaborative learning.
Thank you. So our second question for you today is, what challenges and benefits have you experienced delivering education through technology? I know sometimes, especially in this COVID environment, we're really focused on what we've lost, but there can be some things that we have also gained. So if you could give us both the challenges and the benefits of working through technology, and we'll start with you, Sonali.
Yeah, so we do think there's benefits, obviously, as a mobile education company. One of the things that we were founded based on a randomized control trial from UCLA, Tufts University, and they were really testing, can you teach monolingual adults who were monolingual Spanish and non-literate in Spanish how to read using nothing but a flip phone? That was the study question, and it turned out yes, and it was faster, 84% faster learning gains. And that's really why CELED was founded. It wasn't like a technology searching for a solution. It was a research project that then someone called and said, somebody do something with this. So we do see faster learning gains, and part of that's the self-paced. We can meet learners where they're at, right? Regardless of where they are in terms of like their literacy, their numeracy, their language, we can meet them where they're at. We can definitely tailor the programming to meet both their needs and the partner needs, the learner needs. We can assess and put people at the right level, and people can jump around. So we have English language learners who are learning vocational customer service, and they can go to the unit that is talking about how to negotiate a schedule with your boss in the service industry if that's what they need tomorrow. So they can get the skills they need when they need it, which I think is definitely a benefit. You know, research shows in the US, even prior to COVID, 89% of adults were not getting the upskilling and education they needed because they couldn't make it into classrooms. 1 in 5 US adults doesn't have functional literacy. 1 in 4 lack digital access, which I think we're seeing played out in real time with COVID-19. And 50% need essential skills. So we can build. So when we're teaching like work skills, we can build in numeracy lessons and financial literacy lessons, and it's kind of seamless. So I think there's a lot of ways where we can really kind of integrate and meet people where they're at in personalized education if done correctly. The challenges, you know, it is hard. I mean, it's interesting. We are seeing such tremendous interest in CELED in the last 3 months since COVID happened, right? Because I think it was hard to convince people not to go for the fancy bells and whistles in online education. It was a big push towards gamification and videos, and we even had someone who was from USAID, which we can talk about later, but who was pushing virtual goggles in remote villages to teach things in Africa. It was silly. So I think we're seeing kind of a return to the center, that we're not going for the bells and whistles, because we don't always need to add more and more. We need to do what's effective. The other thing I think is often we're trying to teach learners that are not necessarily, especially CELED, who haven't been successful in formal education pathways. So a lot of online learning is really tailored to me. I have an MBA, I succeeded in regular formal education pathways, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, that gap we saw in that chart where it was, under 50,000, that kind of gap between want and need, most of the solutions are not designed for that group. So what we really do is we're mobile first, but we're not mobile only. We pair each of our learners with a coach, regardless of if they've got a teacher and it's a blended learning model, or if they've just found a flyer at a local library. We make sure there is a personal coach that encourages, nudges, and supports, so there is a human element attached to the online digital learning platform.
Thank you so much. Jenny, I'll have you go next. What are the challenges and benefits that you've seen with online education?
Well, yeah, I have to thank Sonali for just teeing that all up about, especially around adult learners. And I think that's the case for all learners these days, in terms of figuring out how to meet people where they're at. But those are challenges whether we're face to face and or in a remote environment. So there has been and still is a continual evolution and shift around what does learner success look like and student success. When I was thinking about this question, I was actually thinking okay, the benefits and challenges that we have faced in having to do this in a crisis response mode have been very different than challenges in delivering education through technology over the course of time. But when I kind of made the list of those, I thought I found a lot of the same things. They just happened at a different pace and for a different reason. So I actually want to share some challenges and lessons I learned in 2001 that are still spot on for what we've just gone through. So in 2001, the California Department of Transportation had a project management certificate program that we built for them at Sac State. And the goal was really to evolve their organization and to increase the success in project management. And we put the certificate program online, and it was a big lift and a big push and trying to convince people to do it. And yeah, it was, everybody had different technology, everybody had different broadband, people were using different browsers, didn't know where to click. How do you upload your assignment? Wait a minute, am I supposed to be on at the same time as the instructor or another time? All the same things that we're seeing right now, same questions. Some of the amazing benefits I saw, and I wish I would have had the wherewithal to have added research to what we were doing at the time. Caltrans is a very diverse employer, and a lot of engineers come from other countries, and English is not their first language. In the online class, the English as second language learners outperformed the English as second language learners in a classroom environment. And so their command of the written language was stronger because they were able to write and type in an online environment versus speaking in a classroom. You saw culture shifts, right? The traditional American culture classroom of who speaks up and who talks and who dominates did not play out in the online environment. And in fact, you saw people that were more introverted really excel, because in an online environment, quite frankly, most of the time, you have to demonstrate your mastery very, very differently. So we're seeing that now too, that shift. We're just feeling it in this crisis mode in many situations. We also know and continue to see that technology fails. I will say though that live class to class fails sometimes too. Someone doesn't show up. The room isn't open. The air conditioner is broken. Sometimes we can't get onto the technology that we need to get on. one of my biggest lessons learned is if technology is going to fail, it fails over the weekend. So don't start classes on Monday. Start them on Tuesday so your staff and everybody's back and you've uploaded all the patches over the weekend. And then let your classes finish on Monday too, because whether they're adults or more traditional age students, people are working right up to midnight to turn in their paper. And if technology fails on Sunday night at 11 p.m. when they're trying to, need some help, why are we making this harder on ourselves? So it challenges our way of learning with technology, but it also challenges our paradigm of how we schedule and where we meet people and when and how they do their work and how they process. So just a few thoughts.
Thank you. That's fascinating on the English language learner portion. Thank you for sharing that. And Marcus, what are your thoughts on the challenges and benefits of delivering education through technology?
Yeah, so building on some of the things that Sonali and Jenny have said, I guess I can come up with some specific examples. One, in my courses, my students are exposed to how they will support and interact with coworkers and clients. Sometimes dealing with bad technology. In fact, my ISP bounced me off the session a little while ago. That's why you might have seen me twice very briefly, because I've got a cell phone backup solution that I am recommending to my students, and that my students are learning to work with. I remember when we were trying to hire faculty members, and frankly, still to this day, one of the qualifications we try to look for is a MacGyverness of people who, when technology doesn't do what it's supposed to do, who are not just going to say, okay, we're done with class today, who are going to try to make something happen, because that's obviously what we're doing right now. And to an extent, this situation is helping students build those kinds of skills, right? Ideally, they can build a tool set, certainly in the technical fields, to be able to do that. When it comes to other benefits, I guess, is that online for mature learners presents opportunities for providing flexibility. So, for example, I try to, whenever possible, make all the assignments available to my students on day one. They don't have to wait for me to deliver them in class. They can build their learning around their professional schedule and their other family obligations. And frankly, for whatever reason it takes them a little longer to pick up the knowledge, they can do that. They can invest that time, and they're not on my schedule, they're on their schedule, right? Which helps. However, let's not confuse learning maturity with technical skill, and there needs to obviously be a combination of both, because a lot of young people have the technical skill to be able to certainly take advantage of the resources that online learning can make available, but they don't have the maturity of teaching themselves. That's something that most people have to grow into. Sonali mentioned earlier, at graduate levels, yeah, we've done this, right? We've become mature learners. We know why we're doing this, and that, of course, then gives us a certain degree of comfort. And a lot of young learners, especially, just don't have that maturity. One challenge I have for you that we lose with online learning. When I teach my classes, especially towards future IT professionals, I have the lab sessions on campus. I actually have them come in. So we do what's called a hybrid learning. And the benefit of that is that not only can we give them access to equipment that they'll, at some point in time need to be exposed to, but we give them access to each other. They build professional relationships that sitting next to one another and working on the same project with one another is usually more difficult to build. And not that it couldn't be done online, but it's certainly not as easy. And I think that's, that humanity, that reaching out to one another that we do need kind of does get lost as a disadvantage of teaching something solely online. So that's why we try to do a lot of hybrid offerings, hybrid modality, to give students the benefit of, again, that flexibility and of becoming professionals together as they learn.
Thank you for that. And that's a perfect segue into our third question about how online education might impact the employment readiness of students entering the workforce. So there are some concerns out there about can all the skills and interpersonal skills and professionalism be developed through online education only? Will it be sufficient? And Jenny, I'll have you start us off with the answer on this question.
Yeah, so I think all of these things are really intriguing questions because it may not, I mean, I just wonder if the question is really, can this be accomplished through online, or are these things really pushing our boundaries and our definitions of what is professionalism? You know, we're so used to in-person shake hands. Well, what does that look like in a Zoom environment, right? Are we really trying to shake hands, or are we trying to build a connection? What purpose do some of our professional behaviors solve? And I think those are questions really asking ourselves. Definitely at the institution and in workforce groups and with employers, you know, I'm having a lot of these questions, and there's a lot of dialogue, and there's no right answer for it, right? But I'm very intrigued with the idea that we are doing so many more things in a virtual and digital environment right now. It's pushing all of us and pulling us in different ways. And there's something to be said for students or adults who are learning in this way, being able to actually be effective employees in this way, and probably pushing our companies, our services to individuals into a new innovation space that we wouldn't have got to, you know, in this amount of time before. So there's something there. And I think it's, how do you not give up everything you knew? Like, how do you honor the past and save the best? How do you really look towards the future and then be present in the moment to kind of juxtapose those two things?
Thank you so much for that perspective. Sonali, what are your thoughts on employment readiness?
That's interesting. I mean, one of the reasons why CELED has always partnered with employers and education providers is we're a strong proponent of blended learning, right? Like, and the beauty of the mix of the two. I do think there is some things that make students who, you know, to Jenny's point, that might be introverted or different cultures, et cetera, for whatever reason are not speaking up and gaining or advocating for themselves and what their gaps are in a traditional classroom setting. Some of that, or the shame of admitting you're not reading at the same level as your classmate next to you, or whatever that looks like, or you don't understand the math problem on the board. Like, there's so many things that, like, in some ways online learning frees up a little bit, right? You're by yourself, you could do a course on your own schedule, you can catch up on the essential skills. You know, as we all know, in California, community colleges don't have bridge courses anymore, right? But there is still that need, right? Like, based on the statistics. So, like, the supplemental ways that online learning can help bridge essential skills gap, both hard skills as well as soft skills in terms of communication, self-efficacy, all of those kind of things, especially for our English language learners or immigrants who are just getting used to the American culture and work culture, which is very different, right, than other countries' cultures. So I think there's a lot of benefits that online education can provide for employment readiness of students, and address some of those needs and kind of like fill in gaps. I also think, and we're working on this now at CELED, is how do we kind of target, you know, we've been talking about personalized medicine for so long. How do we do targeted and personalized education, right? Like, there are core skills, which we talk about as essential skills as CELED, that everyone needs. But if we can get hyper targeted for an English language learning class for an engineer or a doctor, which is different than a frontline worker, what would that look like? We've done that with hotels where our English language learning class offers words like fluffy towels and plush sheets, which, if you think about, that's not in a traditional class, right, for ELL learners, but plush and fluffy are two of the key words you need to know if you're working in a hotel, up and down the chain, right? So how do we get to those CTE skills, right? Like, the things that need labs, how do we do that? Like, we're talking to a program, we're talking to UCSF about a potential to do anesthesiology training and reinforcement of skills in parts of Africa. I think, to Jenny's point, this movement to online education is going to, which has already been happening, but in this COVID time where you have these really clear CTE or professional development skills, or how to treat, you know, how to train community health workers on COVID-19 practices worldwide, which are so used to being done in person that it's going to have to flip the script. We put a robotics class on CELED, right? Like, there's just going to have to be this shift where we really think differently, and we're going to learn along the way, because, you know, it's not a better or worse, it's different. And I think that's what we're going to have to grapple with. There'll be some things better, there'll be some things worse, but it's going to be different. And that, I think, we're all kind of learning together on that journey.
getting comfortable with, right?
Exactly.
And Marcus, I'll have you wrap up with your thoughts on employment readiness.
Yeah, so this situation is benefiting the YouTube generation that hopefully a lot more of us are joining, right? Because one of the things that I think we're going to get out of this is that people are, at this point in time, by necessity, going to go out and find the resources to get the job done online. Okay, before we always, or well, I guess we could in an on-ground environment go back to the teacher, but we kind of had to work with when the professor was available or the teacher was. These days we can ask YouTube, right? So if there's something that we need to figure out. I'm taking a few classes myself right now to get myself back ready for teaching. And boy, if I want to know something about learning Python programming language, there's lots of information online. There's lots of information on YouTube. So as such, I think and again, this is to me somewhat generation independent. That's where that technology-based skill is going to be helpful. That again, a lot of us are developing right now. But it will make us more independent as we get our job done. I would just caution that we not lose the need for that teamwork and the requirement to work together, because we do live in organizations that live as we live as people, and if we forget that as we learn to be technologically independent, then I think we're all going to lose something in the long run.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. We do have quite a few questions that have been submitted, so I will try to address as many as I can. One of the questions is, what are your recommendations for effective scheduling of online courses? Should they be 8 weeks, 10 weeks, or some other term? Should they be open entry, open exit? Any advantage to credit versus non-credit? So any thoughts on the scheduling and criteria for online courses?
I'll start with this. I know now Jenny's more on the dean perspective, so she's got more, but I'll throw out a bad example. One course I took over this summer was a course that's usually taught in 16 weeks that was decided to be taught in 4 weeks. And if you online, it doesn't seem like it's that much, but those students are going to be busy to the point where I've opened up the course materials early to them so they can get started. So yes, the flexibility appears that we can compress things and make them more flexible, and we should definitely take advantage of that. I know in our department, we've taught short-term courses ever since I can remember, but we need to be careful not to, I think, overdo it, which can sometimes happen.
Thank you. Anyone else want to contribute to that?
Well, I'll just chime in that, for every question, there's another question and another 5 questions, which is, what are you trying to achieve? And is it an understanding of information? Is it a mastery of skill? And those things really do have to drive the length and the way the content is delivered, and at what kind of like syncopated pace do people need to hear it, learn it, then apply it, and come to the next lesson. I think asking those kind of questions will get you to the best timeline for that. And then also knowing your learners' behaviors. I mean, I know that I think that I will, as a learner, like I would love to just log in and log off and have this open-ended time to do my course. But then as a busy adult, I would never get it done. So I need those boundaries of, you need to start here and you need to finish here and you need to get some things done along the way. So it's sort of, what is the behavior of those individuals?
Thank you. I'll go to the next question unless there's anything else there. Another question is, does anyone have a guide from their experience or any information about best practices for online learning or education that can be reviewed? So I guess if you have developed anything, or if you know of any resources that would be helpful to guide people to.
A great resource that we use at the community college level is called @ONE, and it's based at De Anza College down in Cupertino. They've got some great resources really for all levels, certainly focused at post-secondary, but a lot of the practices will go all the way down to pre-K and all the way up to management, C-suite level education. So that's a great resource called @ONE.
Thank you. Anyone
it up now, I'll put a link to University Professional Continuing Education Association. They actually have a hallmarks in online learning. And so there might be some great resources there for people to benchmark or kind of see the bigger picture. And they've just released a new hallmarks for credential innovation. So both of those sets might be able to provide some guidance or at least a framework to think about your work.
Okay, thank
We
you.
have 2 ebooks, one for education providers and one for employers, which is not necessarily about CEL-Ed, but just how to think about digital and online learning options and what that kind of looks like. So we have 2 that you can find on our website, or you could just email me, as well as Digital Promise also has some good resources in terms of digital learning options, but those are 2 that come to mind.
Thank you. I'm going to try to get one more question in. There are some questions about K through 12 education. So one specifically is K through 12 is being faced with a lot of distance learning, and much of the focus is on the delivery of content. Beyond content, what would you advise K-12 to provide students as skills in distance learning that would be of value as they move up grade levels and into the workplace? And at what grade levels are those skills most appropriate, if you have a thought on that?
K-12 is rough. So my wife teaches 2nd grade, and getting everybody online. So the level of, and she teaches in a low socioeconomic neighborhood. The level of getting everybody online, the level of work she had to do to get everybody connected was relatively high. She and her colleagues truly overestimated the level of technology comfort that would be available to the parents. And not really so to the kids. They pick things up relatively quickly. But boy, she went all out, and the right equipment didn't hurt either, to make sure that she was able to bring as much of the techniques that she could use in the regular classroom to her students via online. But you know, our 2nd graders best served via online education. I think she would very much agree with me that that's not the case.
I would agree, and I would chime in that again, stepping back and going, what are we trying to accomplish, like holistically, long-term, short-term? I think at any age, a love for learning, a curiosity for learning and figuring things out pays off in the workplace later on. It pays out through any type of formal or informal education. I say it's more important than the content. The content's important, but if our young kids or our parents or anyone at any age has a hard time with the learning experience, then their love of learning decreases, and that will impede them for a lifetime. So I have so much respect and empathy and worry, honestly, for our K-12 educators right now. I think many of them are less set up to be successful than the higher ed institutions. And I really think they're on the front lines in a very different way. They don't have the personal protective equipment kind of thing as our other frontline workers, but these are our kids, these are our families. And so I applaud whatever the K-12 systems can do to ensure that curiosity and love of learning, because those kinds of innovation things will make those individuals successful throughout their life.
Thanks so much. If I did not get to your question, I just want to encourage you. I know there was one specific for Sonali, and I think she has said that she can be emailed. So if you want to send that directly to her. I'm going to introduce Evan again, is going to close us with how this all dovetails into the poll research that was presented earlier.
Renee, and thanks so much, panelists. That was a great conversation. And as I was listening and thinking back on the poll data, a couple of thoughts came to my mind. First of all, I'd like to throw out this dichotomy of more effective or less effective, or better or worse. You know, I think what I'm really hearing is that it's a different solution set that solves different problems and works differently and works for different people. You know, creating access points and providing a more flexible and tailored approach to education that can be really positive in a lot of people's lives. So really appreciated learning more about that. Some of the things that I thought of kind of forward looking is how important it is to train instructors and teachers. And Jenny, your comments just now about K through 12 and what a difficult pivot teachers had to make and educational systems had to make, and how that could really set us back in terms of the way we think about online education. And so making sure that instructors and teachers are poised for success is what will, I think, enable us to have more successful online and tailored learning approaches for people. I also heard, this need for flexibility in our systems. And so like you all were saying, maybe change the day of the week where the class starts and change the way things are due, and make sure that if we're doing a technology-centered learning application, then technology and the needs of that technology are kind of in the center along with the people who are using it would be really important. And then the other piece is, this goes back to the polling data some as well, this awareness. People who have tried online education are more positive towards it, and it is a great solution for a lot of people. And so how do we make sure that the people are becoming aware of not just transferring on a dime your classroom to online classroom, but also these different alternative models, like Sonali's model around CellEd and other ways that that online or virtual education is being offered in hybrid ways to enhance different types of curriculums and make sure people are kind of aware of that whole suite of tools and don't get too locked into a certain perception of it. So those were my thoughts, and I just really want to thank everybody on the panel. Really enjoyed diving into this more and learning more from your insights, so thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you to everyone who attended as well. And if you are not currently receiving our workforce newsletter, we have a lot of resources, reports and information that goes out on a monthly basis. You can share your email address either in the chat before you disconnect, or you will receive a link to a recording of this afterwards. You can respond to that as well. But we do want to keep you connected to resources that will strengthen the workforce system. And we appreciate you being with us today. We hope you'll join us when we announce our third Future of Work webinar on the impacts of the gig economy. So look forward to that in your email inbox in the near future. Thank you again to our panelists. Appreciate it. You all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.